Welcome to the Magic in the Attic mini episode by Midnight Mark.
The
Today
mini
I
by
have
midnight mark.
today I have Preacher Paul here on to really just talk about the thing that we love, which is movies.
Yeah, I'm the
Um,
guest
we
today, and you're the host.
yeah, we might be joined by JBM if he's feeling up to it, but we're gonna go through it. So, Preacher Paul. We were just texting, and it kind of inspired me to do this. And
Uh huh.
this is going to kind of follow up some future episodes, we think, and which is why we thought it'd be a good mini discussion.
Yeah.
Um, we want to talk a little bit about Alfred Hitchcock because we've been talking a lot about how uh, Piano Man has like seen no movies.
Yeah.
I
He's watched
also have a
I think 8 movies total in his life. Like
yeah.
literally. Yeah.
I also do have a question that I'm going to submit for the pod. Um, so I feel like this might be a fun little preview. Because we talked a little bit with JBM about how certain old movies don't stand the test of time, and
Yeah.
he made a joke about, can we not talk about movies that were made in 1910?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the questions I'm going to submit for our next actual episode is when does a movie, because it's just an old movie, similar to his point about North by Northwest, when does it
Yeah.
not matter anymore, and does it stand the test of time? And why do certain old ones actually stand the test of time? And so I from that spawned into what I want to talk about right now, which is, well, James Bond
I
and how
thought
much
yeah,
I freaking love
I was gonna say, how are
it.
you gonna make a connection from that to
Yeah.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service?
Okay, so
Uh
we're gonna talk about how great On Her Majesty's Secret Service is and why it should be considered maybe the best Bond movie of all time. Um, but I
okay.
want to ask you, how do you feel about James Bond as a series in general?
I'm a huge James Bond fan. I
Oh, man
started
after my own
watching the
heart.
movies when I was a little kid. I thought they were really really cool. They had the gadgets and the flashy explosions and the exotic locations and the sexy girls, and yeah, it's perfect.
Everything that
Yeah.
we want but cannot have.
Yeah. It is a man's like a complete well, it's really like more of a boy's fantasy. Like it's like none of the things conform to reality at all. But that's part of the fun of
According
James
to
Bond.
Hollywood, a white boy's fantasy.
Yeah, well, I mean I feel like I don't know. It's debatable, but he James Bond definitely is white though. But I mean, I feel like there are lots of non-white people that look up to James Bond. James Bond is sort of a universally beloved man figure. Anyway, I mean, feminists hate him, but I
Well,
mean,
what I love about it, and I know there's been articles and articles and different things written about this. I think there's even been like books written about it. But the thing that's great about James Bond is that it holds up that test of time because you can now watch them as sort of
yeah.
like culture type. You know what I
And
mean?
like
Like
even the
if you
ones that are
watch the
bad, like even the truly bad ones, like are kind
mhm.
of fun. Let's be honest, like they're fun to
Yeah,
watch.
the
Like
worst James Bond movies are the ones that are mediocre. They're
yeah,
not so bad, they're good, and they're just not good.
yeah. I
Like
mean, like Die Another Day does actually approach unwatchable. I would say it's
yeah, so
really bad, but I mean they're mostly a fun time. I think, even if they're not like great
mhm.
cinema.
So I've always said for the longest time, and you back me up on this if you want. I think there are three MGM James Bond movies. I'm not talking about Never Say Never Again. We don't talk about Never Say Never Again.
Oh, you don't
But
like
there are
the really old man Sean Connery? I'm kind of
it's a
nostalgic for it these
it's a
days.
Thunderball remake,
Well,
and
yeah,
he's
but
like
he just
90
died.
years old.
Yeah, I guess I want to see him in his prime, not old man, fat belly Sean
Not
Connery.
even old man. I mean, like 10 years past when he should have stopped anyway, man.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. But
oh
Kim
man,
Basinger's in that.
I don't even remember. But Okay, if you want to add it, we can throw that in the dumpster fire. But
No,
like,
no, no,
to
let's
me,
not. There's already too much in the James Bond
to me, there
filmography.
to me there are three. There are three just genuinely awful, hard to even say, oh, this is like a fun, redeemable thing about them. And those are Diamonds Are Forever, A View to a Kill, and um, Die, Die Another Day.
Yeah,
And I'll give my reasons. So, number one, Diamonds Are Forever. It's insanely boring. It also works as a direct sequel to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which it's, I think, one of only two or three James Bond movies that is an actual direct sequel. Um,
yeah,
and it was essentially made to be like, hey, we apologize for like this terrible movie with George Lazenby, which I'll get into in a second about how it's not
no,
terrible and is
On Her
actually
Majesty's Secret
incredible.
Service is good. It's like
Yeah,
really good. Yeah,
yeah. And then Sean Connery was just old and like he clearly didn't want to be Bond anymore. And it's just like he's not good in
yeah,
it. The script is bad. It's an apology for a great movie. Like it's just not good.
yeah. No, it's like Sean Connery phoning it in, getting his check that one last
Hmm.
time. Yeah,
Yeah, to basically get out of a contract, really.
yeah.
And then there is A View to a Kill, which I mean, you could make arguments for some of the other Roger Moore movies. Like I said, like at least with
I was
Moonraker.
saying I think View to a Kill is watchable if only for
Uh,
Christopher Walken. But then you were bringing up Grace Jones, and I was like,
uh,
yeah, she's a
it's
really bad Bond girl. Like,
so it starts out with him basically having a love interest with a female three times his junior.
yeah, like
I
it
mean,
looks like
he's
he is her grandfather.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he's almost 60 years old in
yeah,
this
he
movie,
is
and she is
creepily old. Yeah,
barely 18.
yeah,
And that part, I mean, it's like I said in our text message, he was probably too old to be in A Spy Who Loved Me, which is only good, which is only fine because that is his best movie. And then he
yeah.
made three more movies.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like, and I don't know if this is true because I'm not enough of like a Bond expert or Bondologist or whatever you call it. But I feel like Roger Moore was at the age when they originally hired him, like for Live and Let Die, that like it would have made sense if he had done two or three movies and then quit. But I
I
feel
think he
like
was 44. Yeah,
yeah, but I feel like he was just like, no, I'm just gonna keep doing this, and
just gonna
like
keep going.
they just I don't feel like they didn't know how to stop it because I mean he was popular as Bond.
This chain is rolling. I
But
mean,
man, I watched Moonraker the other day, and that's the fourth one Roger Moore did, I think. And it is I don't wait which came first, Moonraker or
I
Octopussy?
I think it's Moonraker. Hold on, I can look him up. I think
But
yeah,
man, he's really
I'll
starting to
look him
look
up.
old in that one, is what I was gonna say, and that's like late '70s. Like that's not even as bad as it gets in the '80s with Roger Moore.
Oh no, I agree. And that's the let's see here. So he made Live and Let Die, then the Man with the Golden Gun, which I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but Man
Man
with
with
the
the Golden
Golden
Gun
Gun is
is dope.
actually really freaking
And I
good.
also like Live and Let Die. I mean, it's not great, but it's pretty good
The
Bond
only
movie.
problem with Live and Let Die is the end. The Man
Yeah,
with
I
the
mean there
Golden
are
Gun,
parts. Yeah,
I've argued The Man with the Golden Gun is his best movie because it's minimalist. It's like a really minimalist James Bond movie. They're basically on that island the entire time.
yeah. No, Man with the Golden Gun is pretty cool.
Um, Christopher Lee is just a dope bad
Yeah,
guy.
anything with Christopher Lee, I am
Hmm.
there for.
Yeah, so it was Moonraker in '79, then For Your Eyes Only, then Octopussy, and
Okay,
then yeah, and so so
so
yeah, so
Roger
yeah,
Moore
so no,
actually
I'm
did
sorry, he
seven
didn't make
movies.
yeah, he didn't
Yeah, he
make
made four
three
more
movies.
movies
He
after
made
he should have
four.
stopped. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
so but that's my point with the View to a Kill is he's so old, and I mean, no disrespect really to Grace Jones. It's just like she's not like
She's not meant to be a Bond
she's
woman.
not typical like Bond female
She
like
doesn't have like the Bond girl body, I would say.
Yeah, and
I
well,
mean,
yeah,
not to be
I mean,
crass about it,
no,
but
no, no, she was yeah, she would have been better as like just the villain with Christopher Walken. I think she was a fine cast for that. But
yeah,
then to be like sort of his love interest at some point in the movie was just weird.
it's very not
Um,
Bond's type. Yeah,
yeah, again, because she's like this insanely fit
yeah,
villainess and he's like this old curmudgeonly guy and it just is
yeah,
gross. And like if Tim Dalton maybe would have started with this one, you could have potentially salvaged the story a little bit. But man, I
yeah.
mean, but the other thing is it's so overproduced and I can't remember, and it may have been The Spy Who Loved Me, so it might have been the movie before that, but he like kills Blofeld or something, which like obviously was just a bad choice in general. Like
Yeah.
the last leg of Moore is bad, and then finally is Die Another Day, and I say this because
Die Another Day, I say definitively is the worst James
yeah,
Bond movie,
it is,
without
it
question.
is, it is the worst. The whole ice castle thing, like
Every
it just
element of it is totally
yeah,
laughable.
the
Yeah.
dude with the diamonds like stuck in his face, like it feels so. You
Well, and
remember
it,
Batman and Robin?
yeah, it's exactly like
Yeah,
that.
it's
Except, yeah,
exactly like that. Because you know how
yeah,
Batman Forever is actually like it's not good, but it's like kind of a fun, watchable, over the top Batman movie.
yeah,
So that to me is The World Is Not Enough, right? So
yeah,
like you have GoldenEye, which is really good, and then you have Tomorrow Never Dies, which is objectively worse, but is like still like a decent Pierce Brosnan Bond movie. It's
yeah.
kind of got like the whole '90s vibe to it, similar to Batman Returns, right? And then you have
Yeah,
the world. Then
I
you have The
like The
World
World
Is
Is
Not
Not
Enough.
Enough. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
I
like
do
a
too. I think
fun,
yeah,
I
Robert
like, yeah. I
Carlyle
even like
does a
Denise
really
Richards in it. Yeah.
oh my goodness, no. That's the one thing about it that is bad. But like, but yeah,
Yeah, whatever.
yeah, well, no, like, but I
I
really,
mean,
I go to bat for The World Is Not Enough. I think it's got a pretty good plot. I think it actually makes more sense than Tomorrow Never Dies. It just, yeah, Denise Richards like kills it. If she's not in it, it's probably a much better
I
movie.
mean, she is not a good actress, but
No,
it
she's
makes
terrible.
so that she should be in a Bond movie, I would say.
No, I agree. I mean, she's beautiful and
Yeah.
like it, yeah. But man, it just uh,
No, but there's no comparing in
Die
terms of the
Another
Pierce
Day is
Brosnan
like
movies. Die Another Day is it's
it's like a
like
30-minute commercial for how hot Halle Berry is. Like,
yeah,
I
and none of
mean,
the plot makes any sense. And also there's no humor in it. Like it's not like
except for they tried to squeeze John Cleese in there to like be the new Q and like be quippy and it just
yeah,
doesn't
it doesn't
work.
work. Like, and
Yeah,
they got rid of that as in the Daniel Craig movies.
thank
I mean,
goodness.
yeah, like I just I feel like there was no I don't know, there wasn't any of that sort of like dark humor that a lot of the really good Bond movies have. It's just like a movie. Die Another Day is like taking itself too seriously,
Hmm.
and it's also ridiculous. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's painful to watch. Yeah,
I've literally always compared the Pierce Brosnan series to the Batman series, like the before, Chris Nolan. Like you have
yeah,
the two Tim Burtons, then you have the one Joel Schumacher that's bad but has like Jim Carrey as like a pretty, iconic joke Riddler and like it's a weird movie in retrospect, but it's also like Val Kilmer's kind of a good Batman and like it's watchable. It's like a fun bad Batman movie. And then there's, Batman and Robin, which is just awful and overproduced and sappy. And that's how I feel about the other. And so, yeah, I mean, not to say there are only three bad James Bond movies because there are a lot of bad James Bond movies, but those are the three that are like, even if you are a James Bond fan, you're just like, okay, these suck. Am I and like? Did you have another one you want to throw in there? Those are kind of the three that I think of.
yeah. Well, yeah. In terms of the worst, yeah, I think you hit the three that are kind of objectively the worst. I think actually, You Only Live Twice is pretty bad. As well, but it's like it's totally watchable though. When I say it's pretty bad, I mean like it's kind of boring in parts.
I see. I like it better than I like Thunderball, but I just think Thunderball's too
Really?
long. Is my problem. Yeah,
No,
I
I think
I do.
Thunderball's great. um
Okay.
I
No,
mean
I mean, look, I'm all for the original run of Connery. Like, I
yeah,
just
yeah,
for whatever reason, I kind of have a weird like thing for You Only Live Twice. But I mean, I don't disagree with this take that
Yeah.
much, like from a film standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I mean, I would agree about all the late Roger Moore stuff being not that great and him being too old for the role. But I mean, even those movies, I would
Well,
say if they're
the
on, if they're on, I'll sit down and kind of half pay attention and have some fun
mhm.
with it on.
Well,
It.
watch the last 30 minutes of Octopussy, and then the last 30 minutes of For Your Eyes Only. They're exactly the same. They have the exact same ending. Like that's the one weird thing about like Roger Moore is that like if it's spoilers, I guess, if anyone's listening to this and you've never seen it, but like he has four movies in a row where the last scene is basically like the military running down a hill shooting at people. Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this worked in A Spy Who Loved Me, so let's do this every single time. At least A View to a Kill doesn't have that.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. They spared us of that. It just has like Christopher Walken like screaming underneath like what was his evil
Hmm.
plan in that movie to like blow up some
Oh,
dam or
yeah,
something?
it was like it was the like control. uh,
I don't know. He had some ridiculous scheme in that movie,
Oh,
but
okay, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
can't
He
remember
okay,
what it
so
was.
he owns a company that wants to like create an earthquake and wipe out all of Silicon Valley so he can
Oh
like
yeah.
be the only distributor of like whatever they make, the technology.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it was like an early tech thriller. I remember now.
hmm which
Oh
they did
man.
again in Tomorrow Never Dies whenever he tries to like take over
Yeah, when technology was
the
actually real. Yeah.
yeah, when he tries to take over all like the ads of China or whatever
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. But yeah, no,
Well,
that's but not a
the
dumb plot. If you read the plot of
yeah.
A View to a Kill, you're like, oh, that's kind of a neat thing. And then you watch the movie and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean that old man Roger Moore really will kill the momentum of a movie. But I will say, the other thing I was going to say is that I think Timothy Dalton gets a bad rap a lot, but I actually like his Bond. Like both of his Bond movies, I feel like
Mm,
are like watchable. They're not great.
mm.
They're
Yeah.
like they're fine.
See,
Like,
I put him, see, that's my problem
but
with his,
sometimes
and
people
that's
will be
that.
like Timothy Dalton was horrible, and I'm like, he was all right.
Well, my problem with Timothy Dalton is, I mean, they wanted Pierce Brosnan
Yeah.
initially anyway, and Pierce Brosnan was supposed to have like
Yes, yeah.
those
Timothy
six
Dalton
movies.
was the poor man's Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, they wanted Remington Steele and couldn't get him.
Yeah.
But the but my problem with the Tim Dalton movies is exactly what I said before. They're not good and they're not bad either. They're not like, oh, these
Yeah.
movies
They're
are
fine.
trash. And so they're
Yeah.
like, haha, look how dumb this is. Like with Jaws and Moonraker, like running, like hugging that woman while everything's blowing
Yeah.
up. Like,
That
you
was
don't have
awesome.
any of those movies.
Yeah.
So you
That
have
yeah,
like,
they're very safe movies, they feel like the
yeah,
Tim Dalton
and
movies.
they're also kind of dark and I don't know. Like they're again, yeah, I agree. Like they're not bad. They're totally watchable, but I don't know. They're skippable as well because he only did two of them and they're both kind of lower tier. And so that
Yeah.
like they both are. He doesn't have one that's good and one that's kind of crappy. Like they're both just like 6 out of 10,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
would say if you made me rank the Bond actors, I would say Timothy Dalton would be the lowest. But
Absolutely. I totally agree. Yes.
but I don't think he's a bad Bond either. He makes sense as Bond. He's just I think he kind of had an unfortunate timing and when he got it and they wanted somebody else really
Yeah.
instead.
It would
So
have been better
compared
if
to
those
Pierce
two
Brosnan, he's not as
yeah.
good at yeah.
It would have been better if those two would have been Brosnan and Brosnan's third movie was Goldeneye. So like
Yeah.
yeah, but but again, like we talk about this whole test of time thing. Like the cool thing about Bond is okay, so they're kind of old, and you're like, oh, action movies like that they get dated, right? But the cool thing about Bond is like you actually can watch them from the lens of like, oh, this is set in the '60s because they still do spy thrillers that take
Yeah.
place in the '50s and the '60s and the '70s, and so you can almost watch them as not present day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it is for its period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, well
And it's
and
just cool.
yeah. Yeah, and the movies now it seems like take great pains to sort of stamp themselves in like what year they were made, pretty much.
Right.
because it's now existed over 6 decades or whatnot. So,
Mhm.
are we gonna save our favorite Bond movies for a potential top five in the future, or do we
Nah,
want to
let's
do
just
that now?
no, let's do it now because
Yeah,
I feel like we're the only two that really care.
yeah.
So yeah, so you go first.
So, so I would
There's
say,
no wrong answer, Paul.
and the order of this is probably going to be all wrong because I'm not really putting that much thought into it. But I would say for my top five, Casino Royale is going to be one of them. Um, I would say I want to say Man with the Golden Gun, but see, I haven't watched The Spy Who Loved Me recently, so I might actually like that one better in retrospect. I'm not sure, but thinking over it, I think Man with the Golden Gun is my favorite of the Roger Moore movies. And then I go Thunderball on Her Majesty's Secret Service. No, actually, sorry, I'm not putting on Her Majesty's Secret Service in my top five. Thunderball,
Hmm.
Goldfinger, and From Russia with Love.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Well,
that's my top five. The
I will
three
do it.
Connery
Yeah.
movies, the one Roger Moore movie, and the one Daniel Craig movie.
Yeah. I would say probably my like if you're saying like what are the five best James Bond movies,
Yeah.
like what are the five best, not necessarily my favorite. Like my I think the five best ones are number one, Casino Royale. I don't even really know if it's close. Like that is like definitively just the best James Bond movie. Like from a film perspective, from a
Oh yeah,
production
it's definitely the most
perspective. Yeah, I mean,
ambitious James Bond movie. Yeah.
yeah, it just well, I mean, like I guess if you're saying like
Well, just
strip
because
away your
like in the
strip
'60s with Sean Connery, they couldn't have dreamed of doing any of the stuff that they're doing
right.
in
But
Casino Royale.
that's what I'm saying. Strip away your Bond fandom. Like if you just look at them from like a film critic perspective, like
Yeah,
what is the best one, and it is that one.
yeah, Casino
And
Royale for sure.
yeah, and I think, and maybe not number two, but I'll just go ahead and say it, is Spyfall. I mean, Spyfall is just so good.
Yeah,
And
Skyfall is really good, but I feel like
or
it's not.
Skyfall, that's the
Yeah,
board game.
nah,
Skyfall,
you're
yeah.
good. You're good. I feel like Skyfall is not going to age as well as Casino Royale will, though.
Probably
Like,
not. No,
yeah,
I agree with
I
that.
feel like there are things about Skyfall that are very 2012 now, but
Hmm.
I don't know. But that's
Yeah, that's the cool thing about Casino Royale is it sort
yeah,
of has this 60s vibe set in 2008, yeah, or
yeah,
2006. Yeah,
yeah,
I get that. My number three would definitely be on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And there's a few reasons for it. Number one, just like on a grand scale, if you look at movies like Inception, I mean, like Christopher Nolan has said that like a lot of his action movies, like a lot of the action sequences in his movies, are very heavily inspired by that movie. I think if you look at kind of spy movies in general, like what they did for that movie, I mean, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. Um, it's just this massive spectacle of a movie that involves like him being a spy, but also the undercover thing, and also like an action movie. But then, not to mention, they spice in a love story that actually works. Like you
yeah,
actually care. And then you get to the finale of the movie, which is objectively the best final 5 minutes of any James Bond movie. And it leads up to that so well, and I
yeah.
just think it gets lost in the fact that it's George Lazenby and there's some production things with it, and Blofeld is kind of weird and cheesy 60s, henchman guy. Like, but I
That's the one
mean,
with
looking,
Tony Savalas as Blofeld, right?
yes, yeah, and that's the
Yeah,
other
I
thing.
actually kind of like that Blofeld,
Yeah,
but
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, it's Savalas's Blofeld, which I
yeah,
think his is the best because his makes the most sense. It's not like Doctor Evil.
yeah,
He's actually like kind of a brutish guy with a plan, not a dope.
yeah,
Um, and it really kind of introduces like what Spectre is, rather than just like a weird, dumb terrorist organization. And so yeah,
yeah,
so I think if you look at it from like an action movie standpoint, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is so extremely underrated, and is if it wasn't for Casino Royale, I would have a hard time not saying it's my favorite or the best. But yeah. Um,
Yeah,
and then
I put it on my
go.
top five and then took it off. And if I rewatched it, I might rearrange it. But my only thinking was that like it is great, and it is the only time you get a like love interest for James Bond that is like
That
seems
works.
it's the only time where James Bond has sort of like a love story that's beyond just like he is conquering the woman. You know, like they
Hmm.
sell it to you where you're like, oh, James Bond is like loves this woman. Uh,
Well, that's
and
also why Casino Royale works because of Vesper. That's
yes,
another, you know.
yeah. Guess Casino Royale is the one other place where that does happen. But you kind of know. I feel like in Casino Royale, like what's going to happen because,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, you know that can't really last. So I mean, I
Right.
don't know. I do like On Her Majesty's Secret Service a lot. It's snowy. I like that about it. Yeah, go on with what you were saying.
Oh, you're good. And then yeah, and then the two big Connerys.
Yeah,
I From Russia with Love, which is just a fantastic espionage movie, and then Goldfinger. I mean,
yeah,
and Goldfinger's probably the most campy actually of all of the ones, but it's
yeah.
just so good and
It still
iconic. Like
works
it's just
though.
yeah,
It
yeah.
works.
And I mean,
Like
if not Goldfinger, I would agree with you switching that out with the Man with the Golden Gun. I'd probably put Golden Gun as six because I think it is so horrendously underrated as like a minimalist Bond movie. And there is kind of that stupid scene where he does a barrel roll with his car, but like remove that and like it's even got like a good twist at the end. Like, because if you're watching them sort of in a vacuum, you're not really, if you're just kind of watching them in order, like, oh, maybe this is Roger Moore's last James Bond movie and he really does get shot. Like
yeah.
I don't like it's really good, I think, and it feels low budget and it feels less like, oh, look at my weird gadget where, I have a pen that can blow everyone up.
Yeah, but it feels it. I think that movie feels like a lot of the like grindhouse exploitation movies of that era that Christopher
Totally
Lee
agree.
was in a lot of. Like but it has that sort of it does feel low budget, but it also feels like kind of intimate, like those movies felt like. The characters all feel a little bit more grimy and dirty and real. I like Man with the Golden Gun for a lot of those same reasons. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think it's awesome. All right. So to transition a little bit into our next and last segment here for our little mini discussion that
Mini-sode.
I love having this with you, by the way, because you don't complain about movies being old or,
Hey, I mean,
just not watching them in general.
you're the one who's in a time zone where it's after midnight. So
Dude,
you were like, I'm not tired, man. Let's do a mini-sode, and I was like,
I
all
know
right,
I
if you
was
say so.
excited to talk about James Bond.
Yeah,
Um, but like Alfred Hitchcock, I mean,
yeah,
sort of a same way. Like, do you think that his movies are fading to where like there are a few that really do stand out, kind of like Rope, that even though it gets older, the fact that it's a shorter movie and like
yeah.
it has a plot that can stand the test of time. Do you think his movies like Rear Window, some of his classic ones, especially Psycho, as time goes on, do you think they
Yeah.
just become art pieces where you watch them because they're old, or like are they still good?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, I mean, old movies in general. This is what got us into this topic. Was talking with JBM about old movies, but I feel like
Hmm.
this is something I see not just with like JBM, but with all kinds of people. Like, I feel like our cultural context feels increasingly foreign to the world that those movies are set in, right? Like
Hmm.
a lot of the older movies, which is
But
why
objectively,
I
you
I
can watch 12 Angry Men today,
yeah,
even the old one, and
yeah,
most people, even people who do not like old movies, will like that movie.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I think Hitchcock is still relevant to me. He is. I mean, to people who like to watch movies and like actually like think about them. I think that like
Hmm.
Hitchcock is always going to be relevant. Um, because I mean that's what he was about. I mean, I feel like the same reason Kubrick is always going to be relevant, and a handful of other great directors.
But here's the argument with Kubrick, though, is most of his movies were made after the Hays Code, and so
Mhm.
most of his movies were made without the
Yeah,
extreme
you're
censorship.
right there.
And so it's always funny to me when people say, well, if Alfred Hitchcock didn't have the censorship, he still would have made movies that are
No,
like
his
the
movies were
way.
all full of
No,
boobies after the Hays
look
Code.
at well, look
Yeah,
at Frenzy.
yeah,
Yeah, look at Frenzy.
yeah,
Like Frenzy literally has three nude scenes in it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, so that argument that some people make about Hitchcock
No,
like is just total trash. Like
Hitchcock
he
was not
totally,
above putting
yeah.
nudity in his movies. He just
Oh,
wouldn't let him
absolutely
for.
not. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely not. So, but that's one of the things with Kubrick is that he did get to kind of lift the cover off of his movies post
yeah,
2001, which, and I don't even think 2001 would have been rated R even for Kubrick. So like removing that, like only Doctor Strangelove really fits that category.
it's interesting that you bring up the Hays Code because I think that is actually kind of important. Like, I feel like part of the reason why, like, nothing in movies that come out today are subtle, right? Like, you don't have to really pay
Mhm.
that close attention to the dialogue in most modern movies. But in older movies, like, you had to pay closer attention to everything everybody said in the subtext to get what's going on and to get everything in the movie because they can't, like, because of the Hays Code, a lot of times characters can't, you can't show things or characters can't say things in a certain way,
Yeah,
but
they
it's
literally didn't have a toilet on
right.
screen until
Yeah.
1960.
So yeah, but that's why, like, you can have shots of like women in these old movies, like speaking these lines of dialogue that clearly are like like dripping with like sexual intent, but it's so
Double
heavy because
entendre,
they
yeah.
have to signal it through the dialogue, obviously, because they can't show them like
Which is
doing
part
the
of
blanka
that
blanka.
like part of that like again for breaking the barrier for Hitchcock, in Notorious when Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant, that you're not allowed to kiss for more than I think it was like 2 seconds, and they
Yeah,
kiss for 2 seconds I think like 10 or 11 times over the course of like 2 minutes, saying a word in between each thing, like I don't know, just
yeah,
little things he did that
yeah,
you would not think about that if you didn't know that, but like if you do know that, it's really hilarious how
yeah.
he
I
trolled the Hays Code a
Yeah, I
couple
think he
times.
took great personal pleasure in circumventing their rules and sort of like abiding by the letter of them, but not the spirit. Like, that's what
Hmm.
Hitchcock was all about. So I like that about him. He's kind of a trickster in that way.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, I like. Yeah, we will save our top five Hitchcock movies for a top five proper
right.
at some point. But yeah, I think most all of his movies, even the ones that are just kind of so, are still relevant. I think he is kind of a giant of that generation, and there are quite a few giant directors
Hmm.
of that sort of golden Hollywood era.
Well, I
But
sort of
he's the big one.
I sort of thought of this too because like I had never watched oh, which one is it called? I had the one with Peter Fonda in it. That's actually like a true story. Oh
Hmm,
man, what is
what
it?
is that
Which
one?
one is it called? Um,
See, he has some lesser known ones that I haven't seen actually.
yeah, and I had owned this. I've owned this movie for 15 years and I'd
I
never
didn't know he
watched
did
it.
a movie with
And we
Fonda.
we were we were talking about it the other day, and I was like, I'm gonna find The Wrong Man, right? It's 1956.
Okay.
It's with Peter Fonda, and it is a true story. And what was sort of groundbreaking with it is that it was one of those like first thriller true story movies that they did, where it was like we're going to take real life and it's not going to be like a documentary type, or it's not going to be like a musical or whatever, like it's going to be this like thriller, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with that movie is it literally is about the police find the guy that clearly did not commit this crime, and even though it may have been the first of its kind, it's just like, okay, this movie, like this style, has been done 500 times since 1956,
Yeah.
and it is done better now. And so if you don't watch this movie until you're 30, like I did, you're probably going to find yourself pretty bored. Or at least I did, I'm like, okay, it's all right. Like the acting is pretty good, but it just
Yeah.
doesn't, it's like I can watch a different movie that's more updated, that's better than this one. But if you take his very
Harry
next
Dean Stanton has a bit part in this movie.
in The Wrong Man,
Yes.
no way. I did not catch that.
Oh, I didn't know Harry Dean Stanton is dead, but apparently he died in
Yeah.
2017. I thought he was still
He
alive.
he was in The Wrong Man?
Yeah, he was in
Let's
The Wrong
see.
Man. He apparently it was one of his first roles, I believe.
Was he uncredited? Because he's not on here.
I'm looking at Wikipedia. Yeah, he was uncredited, but he
Okay,
was in
yeah,
it.
he must have just been in the background because I did not see him. But yeah, I mean, but take in account literally his next movie is Vertigo, which
Yeah, Vertigo is
I mean, if you think about like
awesome.
he did like The Trouble with Harry, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Wrong Man, all three of which are arguably like lower end, and then went Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, like,
Yeah,
and then The Birds, like bam, 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 all movies people have heard of. Um, and
yeah. I
I
mean, I
would
think the
argue
Birds is whatever, but
it's whatever, but people remember it, and
yeah,
it's always going to stand out as like, the movie Grandma said was good, like, um, but Vertigo, in my opinion, Vertigo will hold up. And I mean, obviously, like you say, we make our list. Like, I mean, spoiler alert, this one's going to be on there for me. But
yeah,
like,
same.
Vertigo just does things that movies even today still try to replicate, and they do not do it as well. I mean, outside of some of the special effects, like when he's like a green head floating in space,
I
like
stand that. I think that's cool.
no, I think it's cool because it's got kind of it's got kind of like this like cool LSD vibe going on with it,
Yeah, Vertigo is
but
super
like
trippy.
it's so good because it takes everything that you know about those movies, especially movies like back then, and just it just tears them apart. Um,
Yeah,
and I don't think there's anything in this movie that makes you go, "Oh wow, that's old." Like that's part of it. And I feel the same way about Rear Window. Like there's nothing about Rear Window that when I rewatch it, it's like, "Oh, this is just old." Like it's kind of this cool like, voyeurism, you know.
yeah,
And there's really nothing in it outside of like there's not someone in there playing a video game or on their phone or something
yeah.
that
No,
doesn't that isn't timeless. And so I
honestly, that's
do.
kind of one of the comforting aspects of old movies is nobody on a
Mhm.
computer or phone or.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that's my thing. I mean, like the cool thing about Vertigo to me is that the twist is halfway through the movie, and
yeah,
then rather than it being like halfway through the movie and then you get through the rest of the movie, there's another one. It's literally got two twists,
yeah,
which is not something very many movies can say.
yeah,
Um, and I do think that's why Vertigo will hold up because just when you think like, oh, he got me once,
yeah.
you know, I mean, that's just how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah, I mean, no, I feel a lot the same way. Yeah, the late 50s into early 60s run that Hitchcock had is pretty unprecedented in terms of like the ambition of the kind of stuff he was doing. Like
Yeah.
Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho. I mean, Travis hates on North by Northwest, but in the
Yeah. And
1950s, you know that was the dopest stuff you'd ever seen on TV
well,
or
yeah.
on
And
the
I mean,
big
like,
screen. Yeah.
I think it was interesting the way that he pushed the envelope. And I mean, you like look at even like Rebecca. I mean, a movie like Rebecca
Yeah.
that came out in 1940, it's just it kind of portrayed women in a different light. Like he
Yeah.
was doing things with women characters that other movies just were not doing, and
Yeah.
really gave, I think, like the actress a voice, in a man's world,
Yeah.
um,
It's very
especially in movies like.
popular for feminists to hate on Hitchcock these days, though.
Yeah, but to me that's super weird because if you look at his movies, like they're not like all femme fatales, they're not all like just damsels in distress. Like most of his movies, like Lifeboat, which is an extremely
Oh,
underrated
I
Hitchcock
forgot about
movie.
Lifeboat. Lifeboat is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Lifeboat is an incredible movie, and it is just spearheaded by a fantastic performance by Tallulah Bankhead. Like, I think that the criticism of him from sort of like the feminist is so dumb
It seems
because
very surface level because I feel like if you
yeah
pay attention to his movies, you can't help but notice that he is actually ahead of his time in many ways in the way he portrays women in a lot of his
I I
movies.
I
Uh,
completely agree. I
I
mean,
think he mostly
like,
gets a bad rap because there's lots of horror stories about him personally being very horrible to women that he worked with.
but
But
wasn't he like that with everyone? Like a lot of people
yeah,
think that Alfred Hitchcock was gay, and like a lot of
he was an
people think that
egomaniac. Yeah, like
yeah, a
most
lot of well,
directors. Yeah,
but a lot of people
yeah,
believe that like his and his wife's relationship was kind of a
yeah.
you
He
know
may have been gay. I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean,
Yeah,
or that at least he had you know extra sexual tendencies or something. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I've like
yeah.
seen and read some things about that about how or maybe like it was his wife, like his wife was a lesbian and they got married, so like I don't know. It's something like that.
Yeah,
So I
unclear.
think
But
I think that criticism is totally ridiculous because Suspicion, Lifeboat, Notorious, um, Dial M for Murder, To Catch a Thief, all of these movies are like very female centric with strong central female characters and I mean even Vertigo like the freaking villain's a woman
yeah,
like yeah
yeah. I mean, and I mean, we haven't even talked about the sort of subtext of Rope, which is a whole other issue.
exactly
Yeah.
yeah well we'll get
Uh,
into that in our because I'm sure we'll talk about that in a regular
Man,
episode because JBM actually likes that movie.
Rope is another one though that I will say JBM is right there. I do think Rope is pretty nearly perfect as a movie, and I don't
Oh it
think
is
I don't think it really suffers at all from
when you
how
first
old it
watch
is.
Hitchcock movies, you don't necessarily go, "Oh yeah, Rope." Like that's like maybe his second or third best movie ever. But then like the longer
But
it
you,
goes,
yeah, but where's the
it
problem in it? You can't find
yeah, you
a
can't. It's
flaw
literally
in it.
perfect, and
Yeah,
you literally yeah, it's literally perfect. And every time I think about Rope, like it's not my number one, but like it's like okay, well no, maybe it is better than that one. You know what I mean?
yeah, and it's very short by Hitchcock standards. Like it's like 80 minutes, I think. Like it's like very short or 85
Yeah, you can
minutes, and
just
it,
yeah, you
yeah,
can just pop it in and watch it like a like an episode of
it
something.
almost feels like a one act play or something, or like a like a short play being performed for you, but it's a movie. It's
Okay.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, so I mean, I guess that's going to go into a little bit of my last little thing was like where do you I mean, it seems to me like there aren't a whole lot of great like just great filmmakers anymore, right? So we're talking about Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick and then certainly
mm-hmm.
Steven Spielberg, kind of the Spielberg,
Yeah,
Scorsese, George Lucas, Coppola crew, those four guys that are all real good friends.
yeah,
Um, I mean, man, like we literally just saw Christopher. Well, I know you're a critic of Christopher Nolan, but Christopher Nolan literally just put out his like his worst movie, right?
yeah.
And he, for all respects, and I know you have your opinion about it, but he has been the best filmmaker of our generation, and at least in my opinion.
In
Um,
yeah, if you're
and
thinking
I,
about
I think you're wrong about some of his stuff, but I definitely
yeah,
I respect that you have an opinion. I disagree with you on a lot of it. But I think if it's not him, it's Dennis Villeneuve, and I just don't think Villeneuve has as many.
yeah,
Um,
okay, so this is interesting and maybe a question for the pod proper, in fact, but I think it's just a difference in like no, Christopher Nolan is probably the most technically talented director alive today in terms of making marketable Hollywood movies.
right.
I don't know if there's anybody who's better at that craft than Christopher Nolan. But
But
I
when he
think
makes small movies, they're still great. Insomnia, The Prestige, Memento,
yes,
all three great
yes,
movies that you even agree are great.
yes, yeah. Although he hasn't made one of those in probably 15 years now, though.
Oh
I
no,
would
yeah,
say.
no, he hasn't. He hasn't.
It
Not
seems
since the
like,
Prestige.
yeah, it seems like he's kind of progressed beyond that at this point, which I think is kind of unfortunate. But like, I guess it feels to me like Nolan is running that same playbook of like Spielberg and George Lucas, and those sort of new golden age era Hollywood guys from like the 70s and early 80s. But it just feels to me like that's not going to work anymore in the 21st century. I don't think movies succeed by the same rules that they used to. Like, I think all the great directors
But what are those
now,
rules? Because right now the only great movies are superhero movies.
well, in terms of like mainstream Hollywood movies, like those are the only
Yeah.
movies that are making a ton of money, I guess. I mean,
No,
well,
that and Ari Aster horror movies, I guess. But other than
well, I was
that, I
gonna
mean,
say I think Ari Aster is an exceptionally original voice as a filmmaker. I would say, I mean, I think you're right that Villanueva is like really awesome talent. And I mean, I think there's probably a dozen or two really solid working directors, but I think the problem is like the studios are getting more and more not viable, unsustainable every year. Like
mhm.
I think as everything goes to streaming, um, well, the studios will sort of basically get their tendrils into, and already are doing this constantly, into the streaming services. So they'll end up still, the same people will end up controlling things in sort of a conglomeration of the same sort of companies, but everything's going to shift to online platforms, and it keeps getting more and more. It keeps getting cheaper all the time to make movies because cameras keep getting cheaper. It keeps getting cheaper to distribute and store data. Um, and
But do you
the,
also think it's kind of the surgence of television series and binge watching
yeah,
that people are like, okay, we can create this story, and rather than making sequels, we can make 10 episodes.
yes. Uh, yeah, I think that like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the talent is in, TV now too. I mean, TV is having a big resurgence. What's weird though is that I still kind of prefer movies, even though like TV is huge.
Mhm.
I find that
No,
like
I do too.
a
From a
lot of the
story
time,
perspective, if you can
yeah.
start and finish a plot, it's similar to a book. I do agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, I like TV, but the show has to be really good and hold my attention really consistently
Hmm.
for me to get all the way through a show. Um, but with a movie, it's like I can strap in for an hour and a half or 2 hours and go on whatever ride this is. If it's not that good, it's not
Yeah.
that big of a deal. But with a
Yeah,
TV
well, and I
show,
also think you could sit and think if you really sit and think about a TV show from its pilot to its series finale,
mhm,
how many of those are actually great, like complete stories? And I think
yeah, it's almost
there's only
impossible.
yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah,
there's like a handful. I mean, I can think of five or six off the top of my head right now, but that's it. Like I couldn't list you
yeah.
50 great top to bottom TV shows. And I could probably rattle off, we could make another 2 hours of this podcast just talking about, I mean, we literally just talked
Just
about
talking
a
about good
great
shows,
James
just talking
Bond,
about pretty good shows that have a bad last season. Like how many shows like that are there? It's like
a
every show.
ton. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Or,
like kind of the standard thing, is that yeah.
yeah, they just die or go. Yeah,
They
exactly.
trail off at the end, yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of my, that's what I was wondering is if you thought that, the craft of making new and original, and that kind of goes with JVM's thing about Parasite. Like and I know you haven't seen it, so I'm not going to spoil it, but I do want you to watch it.
I
I
need to watch
absolutely loved
Parasite.
it.
I thought about watching it
Yeah,
the other
I
night,
absolutely
but then
loved
I
it.
didn't. It's super long
It
though, isn't it?
no, it's not. It starts at
Okay.
it's 2 hours, I think.
Okay,
It
that's not bad.
starts as like one genre and turns into a second genre
I do
and
like
turns
that.
into a third
Yeah.
genre. And it
Okay.
like, the way it goes from like one to another, it's not forced. It doesn't feel gimmicky. It's just like, I don't know, man. It's really good, and it's maybe the only movie that's kind of, I guess, lower budget like that, that doesn't have like a kind of a twist that I was like, wow, that was original, like an
Yeah.
actual original movie that wasn't taken from the inspiration of something else. Like, again, as much as I love Christopher Nolan, the Prestige is really the only movie that he has that you don't that like, okay, The Dark Knight, super great, 10 out of 10, but it's basically Heat reskinned as Batman in a way,
Yeah.
like you said with Interstellar is based that there's parts of
It's
2001,
2001
um,
repackaged,
and well,
basically.
that and Solaris.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like it's kind of you take a lot of those trippy space movies, but but man, like, and but and so that's why Arrival by Villeneuve, like, man, it
Yeah.
was I just did not see that movie coming, like a
Dude,
movie about aliens that isn't a big budget action
you
movie.
know
It's
what
like
movie? You know what the movie that set me onto Villeneuve was, and I think we saw it together. Actually, this may have been when I was working at
Prisoners.
Prisoners, dude.
Yeah.
Dude,
A movie that
Prisoners,
I actually disliked until I watched it a second time and
dude.
went, okay, I was
The
really
ending,
wrong.
the ending of Prisoners,
hmm
freaking knocks the breath out of me every time I
So
watch it. Like,
my problem with Prisoners is that there was kind of a twist in it, right? But they telegraph. But if you're like good at that kind of thing, they kind of telegraph the twist like 30 minutes into the movie,
yeah,
and I sort of like saw it coming. I was like, oh, the guy had the necklace on, and that's the same thing that's in the dude's house, and that's his mom. She's the one
yeah,
that, you know what I mean? Like, and so when it was over, I was like, oh, okay, cool. They did this twist ending, and I literally saw this coming for the last 2 hours. But when you watch it a second time, and you don't worry about there being a twist ending, you just see it for what it is. It's like, wow, that movie was really good.
yeah. No, it's like
And
deep and dark
It's
and
Jackman's
yeah.
best performance too.
Yeah, yeah. Hugh Jackman's great in it. Jake Gyllenhaal's great in it. All the acting is really good. I mean, it's. I was like, this director is somebody to watch, and then he has been. And I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
same
I do
same
not like
same thing with Ari
Blade.
Aster. I'll watch
Mhm.
whatever he puts out from here on out. Like,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
mean, like I've said it, I do not like Blade Runner,
yeah,
but man, 2049 is good. Like, it's
yeah.
just good. I like actually like it, and it makes me kind of appreciate Blade Runner. Like, it was such a good sequel that it makes me appreciate a movie that I find overrated.
That is a good sequel then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
Well, we've
guess
been talking for almost, I mean, 53 minutes now, almost an
okay.
hour. So
Well,
if we go
all
much
right.
longer, it won't be a mini anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my last thing I wanted to ask you, and then we can sign off, is where the heck is Clive Owen, and why is Children of Men like an incredible movie that no one talks about?
What is Clive Owen doing these days? You are right. Children of Men is a an awesome movie. I feel like it was acclaimed at the time when it came out, but so it's one of sometimes there are movies that get a bunch of Oscar buzz and acclaim when they come out, and then like literally the next year, you'll say something about that movie and people will be like, "What movie is that? Never heard of it."
hmm
I feel like that's what Children of Men is, but it's actually awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
super, super, super good movie,
every
and I mean,
day, I
like,
feel like Michael Caine's character in that movie as the
yeah, just
apocalypse closes in on us,
just wants to smoke weed all day long while there's the apocalypse.
just hiding in the woods. Yeah,
Yeah, I just want to bring that up because, like, as much as I love the movie Logan, it's literally just Children of Men reskinned as
dude,
X-Men.
you want to know what? You want to know what the next thing that Clive Owen is going to be in?
Yeah, let's do it.
He's going to be in a mini series, American Crime Story, the
Oh, he's
Ryan
in one of
Murphy.
those.
Yeah,
hmm
and guess who he's playing?
Oh my goodness.
William Jefferson
He's
Clinton.
playing Bill Clinton.
He is playing Bill
What?
Clinton. I'm seeing what this storyline is about. I think it's about Monica Lewinsky.
It's about the impeachment of Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's about the Lewinsky scandal and the impeachment. Yeah.
I'm sure it will end up being a puff piece on how great Bill Clinton
Yeah,
is.
well, it's Ryan Murphy, so I'm sure he'll go extremely easy on Bill Clinton. But maybe he'll surprise me.
How dope would it be? How
awesome would it be if
he
just
actually showed?
Dude, I mean, that could be like the Me Too turning on the Clintons finally. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. I'm looking at Clive Owen's face. I can kind of see how if you put prosthetics on him, you could make him look like Bill Clinton, but he really bears no resemblance to Bill Clinton whatsoever. But that's what acting's for, I guess.
I'm going to look it up, see if he's got one. Clive Owen, Bill Clinton. They don't have any like images of it yet, but if you type it in, Clive Owen, Bill Clinton, and show it like side by side, and you could see how he can pass off.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, before we sign off on here, do you have any additional comments that you feel like people that is just a burning desire of all of the things that we've talked about here recently?
Oh man. If I had one wish, I would wish that people would send your listener suggestions for segments, for questions for us to magicintheatticpodcast@gmail.com, and also to please follow our Twitter at Magic in the Attic Pod. Wait, let me make sure I have our Twitter handle right. I run our Twitter. I need to make sure I know what the Twitter handle is. But yes, follow us on the social medias. Magic in the Attic Podcast.
Oh wow, this ending was flowing so well.
Yeah, no, it sucks.
And then
it's a mini episode. It's a mini episode. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be good. It's at Magic in the Attic. At Magic in the Attic.
All right.
That's where you want to follow us. It would mean the world to us. Please give us a follow. Anything you got on your mind?
Nope. Mark? And midnight mark, just make sure you do what your governor says and wear your mask. On to the next one, folks.
Even between bites.
Good night.
Good night.
The magic in the attic is back at it again. You just chill into the rhythm, and then the beat comes in. Sit right back and just have a good time. Listen to the music and let your feelings fly. Grab one of your friends and just sing and dance till the night ends in sweet romance. Cause all that I'm trying to do is have a good time. All that I'm trying to do is have a good time. Strong. We can't stop now. We're doing this all night long. Cause I just want to laugh it all away. Cause I get this feeling that it is going to stay. Cause all that I'm trying to do is have a good time. All that I'm trying to do is have a good time. It's a beautiful day outside, so come play. Soak up the sun and don't think about the things of the day. thinking about you all that I can, running in circles around and around in my head. All that I'm trying to do is have a good time. All that I'm trying to do is have a good time. All that I'm trying to do is have a good time. All that I'm trying to do is have a good time.